Swaminithi Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you all very much for joining today's session. We have been discussing from the book Bhakti by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in which we have been discussing the we have discussed 8 of 12 essays. Last week we completed discussing on Nishchaya, or endeavoring with confidence, about the 6 things which are very favorable for devotional service. We already discussed about Utsaha or confidence, or Utsaha or enthusiasm, and endeavoring with confidence. We had discussed on that. And I will do a quick recap of what last week. So we did discuss about the Dashamula Tattva. So the 10 essential truths, the 10 essential conclusions of our Vedic scriptures, especially the Bhakti Shastras. So in that we had this the 8 tattvas already, and last time we could discuss the 9th and 10th. So the 9th and 10th tattvas talk about the Abhideya and Prayojana, the means for attaining the goal and the goal itself. Okay, so we saw that pure devotional service is the Abhideya. Sadhana Bhakti is the Abhideya. So in this we discussed that there is a difference between Sadhana and Abhideya, even though both may seemingly have the same meaning as a means to attain a goal, but a sadhana generally refers to a means to attain any goal. The means to any goal is called sadhana, whereas the word abhideya is specifically used when the goal that one is aspiring for is the ultimate goal, and one has very clearly understood that it is the ultimate goal. So therefore, sadhana bhakti only is addressed as abhideya, and prema bhakti is the only prayojana. Even though there may be multiple sadhanas and multiple sadhyas, actually abhideya is one and prayojana is one, and our scriptures are very clear about it. So therefore, primarily there is the scripture specify as one's prime duty. Whatever the scripture specifies as prime duty is called as abhideya. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very clearly mentions what that abhideya is. Krishna Bhakti hai abhideya pradhan, Bhakti Mukha Nirikshaka Karma Yoga Gyan. So Karma Yoga and Jnana, they cannot function without the support of Bhakti. Yehi sab sadhane ati tuchhabal. All these sadhanas of Karma Jnana Yoga have very insignificant strength. Krishna Bhakti vinata hai dite nare phal. Without the element of devotional service in any of these practices, none of these practices are actually capable of giving any result. Okay. So then he says that this sadhana bhakti is divided into 2 parts. One is Vaidhi and Raganu. The differentiation is based on where one draws the impetus to perform that bhakti. When the impetus comes from the instructions of the Shastra, it's called as Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. When the impetus comes from a spontaneous greed to follow in the footsteps of the Vrajavasis, then that is called as Raganuga bhakti. So, and he says that Vaidhi sadhana has 64 limbs, or which can be summarized into 9 limbs: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Apedanam. So he says that the difference between karma, jnana and bhakti is the mood or purpose for which one performs those activities. Um, when the limbs are performed with separate desires, they turn into limbs of karma. When the limbs are connected with right thoughts of Brahman, they become limbs of jnana. But if the fruits of one's activities are performed for the pleasure of Krishna, it is called as bhakti. So, but when the fruits of karma are used for one's own enjoyment, it is karma. But if the fruits of one's actions are utilized for achieving impersonal liberation, it is called as jnana. So therefore, the essential symptoms of bhakti are as described by Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam Anukulyena Krishnanasham Bhakti Ruttama. In this context, last week we discussed about okay, we'll come back to that. So in which Anyabhilashita Shunyam indicates the purity of goal. The goal has to be very pure. And Jnana Karmadi in Anavritam indicates the purity of practice. So pure devotional service means the goal has to be pure and the means to attain that goal also has to be pure. So only then it is called as Uttama. Otherwise it is considered to be mixed devotional service. Right? So then we saw the difference between the Vaidhi and Raganuga Bhakti where that inspiration or impetus to practice Bhakti comes from. So Raganuga Bhakti is certainly very powerful, much more powerful than Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti because there is an element of you can say spontaneity in that. And then we also saw that in we spoke on this theme of continuity because Anushilanam has to be continuous performance of devotional activities. The practice of devotional service has to be continuous. So we saw what does continuous mean for a sadhaka. We said the pie chart. Some part of pie chart may a part of it is used in direct engagement in devotional service. A part of it is used in planning, and some of the time may be utilized in firefighting. As long as there is no fourth, one should not consciously, with proper planning, engage in activities which are not favorable for devotional service, devotional progress. One should not factor in with proper planning. One should not try to engage in non-devotional activities. Non-devotional activities, one may succumb to those activities unwillingly due to the force of one's conditioning, but one should not actually plan to engage in non-devotional activities. That is certainly not pure devotional service. So that way, if even sadhakas can engage in continuous devotional service when you factor in the firefighting aspect also. And then Tiffany Mataji asked about how devotees can perform Anyabhilashita Shunya Bhakti, and then we discussed about the essential difference between the desires which are born out of one's and desires which are born out of one's nature or swabhava, and how these two types of desires are distinguished as abhilasha and anarthas. That how one may, a practitioner may parallelly possess these two types of desires in the form of anarthas and in the form of abhilashas. So as long as we don't have alternative desires in the form of our cherished goals, even if we may possess alternative desires as a part of our conditioning, it still falls within the category of sadhana bhakti, which also falls within the category of uttama bhakti. We saw this last time. Then we discussed the 10th, the last of the Dashamula Tattvas, which is Prema is the Prayojan, love for Krishna. So in this we learned from Chaitanya Charitamrit, the 10 stages, Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishruchi, Asakti, Bhava and Prema. So we saw these 10 stages, how one gets Shraddha by Agyata Sadhu Sangha, unknowing association with devotees by which we develop favorable devotional impressions which accumulate to give faith, and faith manifests, inspires us to take the association of devotees, and in association of devotees we engage in devotional service, and devotional service leads to gradual destruction of unfavorable desires, unfavorable vasanas. Then this leads to steady practice of devotional service. Steady practice of devotional service matures into ruchi, where we have a very natural taste for the limbs of devotional service. Then that ruchi gradually matures into asakti, where that attachment turns to attachment to Krishna, and then we enter into the realm of spontaneous devotional service, where we enter into the bhava, which is love of Godhead in its budding stage, and then eventually that bud matures into a flower and fruit, which is prema. We saw this, and this prema is the goal of one's practice, or abhideya. The goal of one's abhideya of sadhana bhakti is actually. So then we saw that those who have doubt in these 10 principles are not qualified for devotional service. When doubts arise, and if we don't address those doubts, then our faith becomes corrupted. When our faith becomes corrupted, then it leads to results which we may not be aspiring for. So, like that. So, therefore, essentially, one should have a very clear understanding of what is what are the 10 essential conclusions or principles. Then we discussed about Srila Prabhupada. He has mentioned about Nishchaya in his Nectar of Instruction. Prabhupada says that in devotional service, surrender means that one has to become confident. The devotee always thinks, Avashya Rakshibe Krishna. Krishna will surely protect me and give me help for the successful execution of devotional service. That faith is called as confidence. And Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Swami Maharaj was commenting along the same lines, where he mentions confidence means Rakshati iti Vishwaso, having full faith in the protection of the Supreme Lord. This is a particular stage of Sharanagati. So Maharaj says that one may run to oneself knowing that there is danger, but he is still thinking that my guardian Krishna will save me. Therefore, I don't care for anyone. He's my master and he's going to protect me. So that faith is called as confidence or nishchaya, having faith in God's protection. Okay. Then in this context, we discussed, okay, if Krishna's protection is guaranteed, should we endeavor to protect ourselves or not? When we are in danger, should we ever endeavor to protect ourselves or not? We got into this question. Like say, for example, if someone is diagnosed with a disease, should one go to doctor to treat that disease, or should one just think that Krishna will protect me? So we saw that in this context, that the ability to tolerate suffering is directly proportional to one's advancement in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, if one is not very much advanced, one's ability to tolerate suffering will compromise. And if one is unable to tolerate suffering, then one will not be able to concentrate on devotional service. So with a desire to concentrate on our devotional service, if one tries to address overcoming the suffering, or if one endeavors to overcome one's suffering so that one can focus on practicing devotional service nicely, that does not fall outside the realm of pure devotional service, because tolerance to suffering is proportional to our progress in the path of devotional service. So therefore, but just that we have to, our endeavor to overcome that suffering, the endeavor should be in a direction, in a way that it does not threaten our pure devotional faith, right? There are multiple ways of overcoming the suffering. One is to go to a doctor and rectify that suffering. That may not necessarily challenge the pure devotional faith of the practitioner. But if one goes to an astrologer and things like that, then because the whole science of astrology is based on karma, then one starts develop one when one tries to adjust one's karma to overcome suffering, then the problem is that one loses the ability to see the hands of Krishna, who is orchestrating these sufferings in the lives of a devotee to bring him closer to the lotus feet of Krishna. And Krishna sees that the devotee is adamantly refusing to see his hands, but he wants only karma to control his life. And Krishna agrees, because Krishna does not want to interfere in the life of any living entity. So he says that you don't want me to control your life. If you want only karma to control your life, then I will allow karma only to control your life. So then devotee loses faith in Krishna's orchestration, and he becomes helplessly dependent on karma, and he keeps adjusting his karma again and again and again and again to overcome his suffering, and unfortunately losing the ability to see Krishna's hands and thereby progress on the path of devotional service. This is the problem. So, so therefore, he says that this Nishchaya means I shall risk everything for that, and if necessary, he may come for my relief. Such audacious aggression is there. So this kind of confidence is closed. So he says that this kind of mood is seen even in the material realm, like you see in an armed, in an army, a soldier have that kind of confidence in his general, that he will run into the he will run into attack his the enemy camp with full faith in his general, that if I get stuck up, my general will come to protect me, like that. But in the spiritual realm also, one has to develop that kind of confidence in Krishna, and this kind of confidence is seen in in the Brajavasis, especially in the in the friends of Krishna. They run into the mouth of Agasur. They jump into the waters of Yamuna, which has been poisoned by the poison of Kalia, and they feel that yes, my friend Krishna, he will protect. Okay, so and there is, when someone surrenders from Krishna's side, there is absolutely no doubt whether he will protect or he will definitely protect. But the only question that remains is, how strong is our surrender? Have I surrendered sufficiently to Krishna? That is the most important. So therefore, he says the most important aspect of Nishchaya is self-analysis, self-questioning and self-analysis. How much have I surrendered to Krishna? Have I sufficiently surrendered to Krishna? Right. So, so therefore, he says, yeah, then Prabhupada gives the example of this cowherd boys and Kalia. So then he says that, so generally they don't even pray for protection, they have faith in protection. But in very rare cases, as in the case of the Govardhan Leela, the residents of Vrindavan actually prayed for protection from Indra, because Indra was such a big personality. So they prayed for protection to Krishna. But in general, there is no question of even praying for protection. There is faith that Krishna will protect. Okay, that is the idea they maintain. And he says that especially in Sakya Rasa, Rakshishyati iti Vishwaso, this faith in Krishna's protection is very strong. And we discussed last week that this kind of confidence comes when the initial two limbs of devotional, when the initial two limbs of surrender are perfectly followed, then one develops the faith in Krishna protection, which is anukulyasya sankalpo pratikulyasya varjanam, accepting whatever is favorable for progressing in bhakti and rejecting whatever is unfavorable for progressing in bhakti. When we very scrutinizingly accept these terms, then gradually over a period of time one gains confidence in Krishna's protection, right? So one develops the discrimination and the ability to see Krishna's hands, Krishna's loving benevolent hands in each of the situation that we are put in, whether externally favorable, externally unfavorable. Okay, like that. Okay, so this is what, but of course, there is a higher stage to, there is one thing to have full faith in Krishna's protection, that Krishna will protect. But there is a higher stage where Krishna becomes dependent on the love of the devotee, and the devotee tries to control Krishna, protect Krishna. That is the still higher realm. And this is what Maharaj calls as family life, sweet, sweet family life. And the devotees of the higher type see devotion even the absolute is defeated. So Krishna becomes defeated, Sri Rama, sometimes Madhumangal, and all of them, they defeat Krishna, they make fun of Krishna. And this is family life. This is sweet family life, like that. Okay, so this is where we ended our discussion on what do you Nishchaya. So before we move on to the next theme of Dhairya. So Dhairya is the third principle, the third limb of the third aspect, which is very favorable devotional service. Before we move on to that, if there are any quick discussion points, comments, anything anyone would like to share as add, you can please raise your hands. Or if you're not comfortable, you can even type your questions in the chat box, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Okay, there is one hand up, Mother Gail.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Mother.
Yeah, just there are a few things for me. One is that I need to get a little clarification about the connection between one's confidence that Krishna will, protect. I guess when we talk about confidence, we're talking about Krishna's protection of our devotional creeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the connection between that and surrender. Another thing, whenever this word surrender comes up, I always have to, let me see. Yeah, just, I guess surrender meaning just always being ready and disposed to doing whatever Krishna wants. So how would you link these two concepts? Confidence in Krishna's protection and surrender.
Well, the devotional literatures give a very holistic understanding of surrender, because the word surrender, as we are it's unfortunate that we have to use words which have very strong material connotations to describe subject matters which are spiritual in nature. Surrender is one such unfortunate word. I feel very bad this word, because surrender creates a very unfavorable, at least for me, I don't know for about others, at least for me, for myself, surrender sounds very awkward. Uh, in the spiritual realm, when we talk about surrendering to Krishna, actually, when Bhakti scriptures talk about surrender, that surrender is a byproduct of love. That surrender is a byproduct of love and trust. And that surrender is not a byproduct of fear. So surrender, does it mean uh, uh, a kind of flexibility to the will of Krishna? Yes. So definitely surrender does mean a kind of flexibility to the will of Krishna. But having said that, flexibility comes because of um, total confidence in Krishna's omnipotence, omniscience, and not only that, omnibenevolence also. So, therefore, that surrender, the mood of flexibility, the mood of becoming flexible to the desire of Krishna comes from a firm confidence, firm trust in Krishna's omnipotence, omniscience, most importantly is omnibenevolence. Here is Krishna who is most benevolent, who is always willing to protect me, lend helping hand, uh, and at the same time he is capable of doing it also. He has all the power to protect me, and he has all the capability to understand what I need exactly, much more than much more than myself. He knows what I need the most. So that confidence is what. So surrender, as portrayed by the devotional scripts, is not the surrendering of a criminal to a cop or a police officer. Helpless, the helplessly cornered, forced to surrender. The surrender that is portrayed by our devotional scriptures is like the happy, willing, joyful surrender of a child to a loving father or mother. A child. His Holiness Radhanath Swaraj gives this example of how when in New Vrindavan in early days, when he used to attend the Mangalarati, one of his god brothers used to come with a small 3-year-old child and 3 or 4-year-old child, and during Mangalarati, he used to toss that child up in the air. Everyone around him used to be completely scared. What if he misses that child? The child may fall down and injure himself or herself. I don't remember. But the child used to be in bliss, laughing, and in total confidence in Father. In his omnipotence and omniscience and omnibenevolence. So that is surrender actually. That's the kind of surrender, and that kind of surrender. Uh, so therefore, confidence. So the confidence in Krishna's intent to lovingly protect me and his capability to protect me, that is making me completely flexible to his desires. So that is the kind of surrender that is portrayed in the scriptures, and that is the kind of surrender And good you brought out this point. I will just take this opportunity to add this point also. That is why any other means of making someone flexible to the instructions of Krishna Guru is not conducive to the essential principles of surrender. Like if you make that person feel guilty or fearful, okay, many times we try to make the subordinate comply by using the principles of fear and guilt. Like we say, you're saying no, don't you know that this is the project of your Guru Maharaj? So now you also know very well that he is working on the project of his Guru Maharaj. He knows that. You know. Why do you have to remind it? By reminding it, what kind of emotion are you trying to invoke in that person's heart? Guilt, right? Guilt may lead to compliance. Guilt does not lead to surrender. Not the kind of devotional surrender. Sometimes we may threaten a person by telling him, do you know the consequence of you are not performing this thing? You have to surrender. So that invokes fear. So generally, fear and guilt, these emotions very soon become hatred. So, and it becomes antithetical to the whole principle of surrender, because surrender is based on love. Love and trust is the foundation of surrender. But if we try to induce that surrender through guilt and fear, that whatever comes out of it becomes antithetical to surrender. So when you see that a person knows that this is the project of his Guru Maharaj, this is the project of Prabhupada, but still is showing distinct lack of enthusiasm and intent to perform that duty, it is just a symptom that he lacks sufficient love. So lack of compliance or lack of enthusiasm indicates that the person is struggling with love and affection. So subsequently, the authority should act in such a way that he should inspire that love and affection for the Guru and Krishna in the heart of that person, and that way it leads to proper surrender. Otherwise, one may force compliance from the side of the subordinate through guilt and fear, but that is not surrender. That is compliance out of fear and guilt. And that fear and guilt are transient emotions. They will very soon transform into hatred. And eventually, that person may develop institution, he develop hatred towards the Guru. He may develop eventually hatred towards Krishna also. So, therefore, the purpose is not to get things done from the subordinate, but the purpose is to actually inspire love in the heart of that person, so that, and that is the way, as Prabhupada calls, fanning the spark of voluntary service. That is what a leader is supposed to do. Fanning the spark of voluntary service by inspiring love rather than utilizing the the rather than utilizing guilt and fear to bring about compliance. Compliance is short term, surrender is long term. To inspire surrender needs hard work and real substance in the leader. To bring about compliance is easier, but it's not sustainable in the long run, actually. So therefore, I'm glad that Mother Gail brought out this question, even though I don't know if I spoke anything relevant to the question, but just that I shared some thoughts which just randomly came to my mind. Is that, I mean, did I even come close to addressing your question, or was it something else that you had in your mind, Mother?
My goodness, it was such a beautiful answer. So, the connection between confidence and surrender, I could also say that it's the connection, a synonym, right, would be a connection between trust and surrender, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yes, like I said, that was so wonderful, that answer. Another thing I had was, when it comes to having confidence in Krishna's protection, when does confidence become or cross the line and become like a kind of presumptuousness? How do we guard against presumptuousness?
Oh, you mean presumptuous? You mean to say presumptuousness in a negative way?
Yes, like, it's a kind of
False
confidence. I just feel that, well, not false confidence, but yes, we should have confidence that Krishna will protect us, but
take responsibility.
It seems like, excuse me?
Yeah, I mean, you mean irresponsible, like do irresponsible things and hope that Krishna will protect you, like that?
Oh yes, you're clarifying my own question for me. Yeah, right. Yeah, so I think you're actually kind of answering my question, that a presumptuous person will rely on Krishna's protection without taking responsibility for making proper endeavor, maybe. If you're relying on Krishna's
another thing. Another thing is, if you remember, I did say that this confidence in Krishna's protection is a byproduct of actually practicing the first two limbs of this thing properly. Anukulyasya sankalpo and pratikulyasya varjanam. Scrutinizingly practicing whatever is favorable for Krishna consciousness and avoiding whatever is unfavorable for Krishna consciousness. So which means such a person, that these two limbs indicate responsibility on the side of the practitioner. So I'm hearing my own voice. I think.
No, but there's no echo here. For me, there's no echo.
Okay. Yeah, because you have your speaker on, I think.
No, it's not.
Oh, isn't? Okay. Tiffany Mata says she's also hearing the echo.
Oh, I'm the only one who's not hearing. Okay, so I guess I should just mute.
Maybe you should, if you mute yourself, I have muted you. Okay. So now we are not hearing any echo. I'll unmute you, Mataji, in a second as soon as I share something. So what was I telling? Yeah. So therefore, this kind of confidence, when you see this kind of confidence in a person who is clearly not following the first two principles of surrender, which is uh, diligently accepting whatever is favorable for Krishna consciousness and diligently avoiding whatever is unfavorable for Krishna consciousness, then that that confidence seen in a person avoiding these first two limbs, that confidence is probably false confidence which is born out of irresponsibility. So this is a surrendered person does not want to pass on that responsibility of his uh, mm, of all his improper practice onto Krishna. He will not take any responsibility and he will think Krishna will take care or Krishna will protect. That is not the right understanding. So that kind of confidence should be very clearly seen in conjunction with the first two limbs, where there is diligent acceptance of all the limbs which are favorable for Krishna consciousness and diligent avoidance of those activities which are unfavorable for Krishna consciousness. Is that relevant, Mataji?
Yes, it was the element of responsibility, I think, that was missing for me. Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Just one last thing for me is, you had given the example of a person who, seeks the advice of an astrologer to change his karma. So a person who goes to a doctor to cure his disease, that is also, it seems to be, an attempt to change one's karma, or is it not?
It is not. Okay. I will explain to you how.
Okay.
Let me just share the screen and I need to write something. I will just mute you for a second and then I will. So let me share the screen. So we are going to start Dhairya and I will just add one more slide here. I've spoken about this many times, but the question keeps coming up because it's a very relevant question. So the question is, if I am suffering, if I get a bodily ailment, I go to a doctor to cure it. So what's wrong in going to an astrologer to get it fixed? So what is the essential difference? You are telling that if you go to an astrologer, you are trying to change your karma. Then what exactly are you doing when you go to a doctor? This is a very valid question. Many times people get. Okay. I will touch on this topic. Krishna, in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, talks about 5 causes of success of an activity. Okay. So first, I will just write the Sanskrit and then I will give the English translation. Adhishtanam tata karta karanam cha pratagvida vivid pratak cheshta and daivam chaivatra panchamam. So there are 5 causes: adhishtanam, karta, karanam, cheshta and daivam. Okay. Adhishtanam means, it means 2 things. One is place, another is body. Okay. So adhishtanam means place, adhishtanam means body also. So when one the success of a particular activity depends on whether one is physically endowed to perform that activity or not. And also it must be in a favorable place, like many times we like in football or basketball, you might know, there is home field advantage. You have your home crowd supporting you, very vociferously, then it definitely boosts one's confidence. So the place and the body definitely is, one must be physically endowed, and also, one must be at a place which must be favorable. Like that's why Dhritarashtra became little bit concerned that the whole battle was happening at Kurukshetra, because he knew that Kurukshetra was a pious place. So he was afraid that the piety of that place may influence um, the result of that battle. That's why he says, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsava Mamaka Pandavas Shaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. So he has Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, like that. Then Karta. Karta means self-identification. Okay. So self-identification. So in order to get a particular job done, one has to identify with oneself as being capable of accomplishing that job. Okay. You can say something like an oversimplified explanation of this karta is, you can say something like self-confidence. It's not exactly self-confidence. It's something like, okay, if someone approaches Mother Gail and says, would you like to teach Bhakti Shastri? So she might be conversant with the subject matter, but she might think, oh, I am not a teacher. I am not a teacher. I am actually a book distributor, or I am actually a singer. So if one has that kind of a self-identification, even though the capacity may be there, but if there is no karta bhav, if there is no mood of being a doer of that particular activity, then one cannot accomplish it. So this is the second thing. The third thing, karanam means senses. So one must not just be physically endowed, one must be sensually endowed also to accomplish a particular activity. Okay. So, so karanam refers to the subtle senses. Okay. And adhishtanam refers to the gross senses. Like you have the eyeballs, you need the eyeballs to see a particular thing, but eyeballs in itself is not sufficient. You should have proper visual power to actually see. So that first three. Okay. And then the fourth is cheshta. Cheshta means endeavor. Okay. And then daivam means karma. Okay. So for the particular discussion purpose, let us actually forget about the first three. Okay. Let us assume that the first three are favorably available. So let us just, for discussion purpose, consider that there are only two factors. One is cheshta or endeavor, another is daivam or karma. Okay. So now for a devotee, the cheshta factor is there, but the karma factor is replaced by mercy of Krishna. Okay. So sometimes the mercy of Krishna may also require, the mercy is not at the cost of endeavor actually. Okay. So now forget about devotee. Okay. So when a person goes to a doctor, to cure his disease, that falls within the category of cheshta or endeavor. But when one goes to an astrologer, because the success, whether so here the success is uh, the success is freedom from disease. So now the freedom from that for that particular disease that he is undergoing, it may depend 50% on endeavor and 50% on karma. Okay, so in that case, what will happen if he goes to a doctor? The doctor may treat the disease. It may not very easily get cured, so he may have to the basic antibiotics may not work, so he may have to use some specialized antibiotics to treat that person, and the disease gets treated. Okay, but there may be some cases which are 100% karmically predestined not to get cured for, let's say, 10 years. Okay, not to get cured for 10 years. So therefore, what will happen in such a case? You go to a doctor, he will diagnose your disease, prescribe a medicine, the medicine will not work. Then he will go to the second level antibiotics, that will also not work. Third level antibiotic, nothing will work. Then the doctor will scratch his head and say that I don't know what I can do. That is why in traditional Vedic society, if you see the traditional Vaidyas, the Ayurvedic doctors, they also knew astrology. So what will happen if a patient goes to a doctor? The doctor will do diagnosis and he will prescribe a medicine according to his diagnosis. So if the medicine does not work, then he will give a second set of medicine. Even if that does not work, he will give a third set of medicine. And if nothing works, then you know what that will do? He will open the birth chart of that person. He will open the birth chart person. He will check his karma. And if he understands that this disease is karmically destined not to get cured for the next 5 years or 10 years, then he says, I'm sorry, I do anything. Okay. So which means when in the traditional setup also, in terms of curing diseases, primarily the first option was always to try if it is within the scope of endeavor. So medical science falls within the category of endeavor. If it is possible to cure the disease within the endeavor, then it is cured. Otherwise, if it becomes difficult, then they check the astrological chart to check how much of it is karmically destined. If it is completely karmically destined and there is no scope for endeavor to cure it, then the doctor says it is not within my scope to cure you. Like that. So therefore, there is a difference between, but if you go to an astrologer, then he will see, he will adjust the karmic aspect of it. He will see how much of it is destined by karma. So he'll adjust. Okay, Rahu is here, Ketu is here, Surya is here. You adjust, pacify them, do this puja, that puja. So that comes within the category of karma. So as we discussed last time, I don't know where I discussed. For a devotee, his suffering is not given by Krishna, but it is given by karma. Okay. But the question arises, so should a devotee endeavor to overcome suffering? Should a devotee at all endeavor to overcome his suffering? Because if the suffering of a devotee is given Krishna, should he just not try to tolerate it? Because Krishna has only given it, right? So we discussed last time that I don't know where I discussed, whether it was Bhakti Aloka or somewhere else. The ability to tolerate is directly proportional to level of advancement of an individual. The ability to tolerate is directly proportional to the level of advancement of an individual. Okay. So, and therefore, the more one is able to tolerate, and this is inversely proportional to one's endeavor to overcome the suffering. So, if one is greatly advanced, then he will have the great level of tolerance, and he will not endeavor much to overcome the suffering. He will be tolerate that suffering. But if one is not sufficiently advanced in Krishna consciousness, then his ability to tolerate the suffering will be less. So in that case, he has to resort to some kind of he can peacefully practice his bhakti. But the only thing is, his endeavor should not contaminate his faith. Okay. So if he goes to a doctor and tries to fix his bodily ailment, that is not due to challenge his faith or contaminate his faith. But if he goes to an astrologer to fix his problem, then the point is, then you are essentially telling Krishna, my suffering is, you have no role to play in my suffering. You have no plan in giving me suffering. It's all due to karma only. So I will only adjust my karma to get rid of my suffering. So that will contaminate our faith. So therefore, it is, so if someone tries to tell you that, oh, just like when you suffer, you go to a doctor. So when you go to an astrologer, it's the same. It is not the same. It is definitely not the same. One should not fall for this argument. Actually, this is a flawed argument. This is not a very intelligent argument. Is that relevant, Mother Gail?
Prabhu, I think I'm still a little fuzzy as to why this is not an attempt to change karma. You know, the person whose faith is pure but is weak, right?
Mm-hmm.
He needs to make endeavor to get rid of this illness. But the illness, okay, on the one hand, you can say the illness is not by karma because it's Krishna sent it, right? For the devotee.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he is trying to reverse something that he knows is sent by Krishna, it just seems like that's the same thing that a person who seeks an astrologer is doing.
Well,
he's also trying to reverse.
Now the point is, Krishna wants you to respond to the situation. I will mute you, Mataji, because we are receiving the echo.
Yes.
So Krishna wants you to respond to the situation. Who told that Krishna does not want you to reverse the situation? Krishna wants you to respond to the situation. So whatever you think is the best response. So if the person thinks, oh, I am not able to tolerate this fractured hand. The pain of this fractured hand is too much for me to tolerate. I am not able to focus on my chanting. Let me fix this fractured hand and chant nicely. So Krishna wants to see how you respond to a situation in a way that protects your Krishna consciousness. That is what Krishna wants to see. Who told that Krishna does not want you to reverse suffering? Krishna wants you to respond to the particular situation that he puts you into. Okay. So he wants to see your response. Okay. The response may be to tolerate if you can and continue your devotional service, or and continue your devotional service. He wants to see, are you responding in a Krishna conscious way? That's all. So now who says that when Krishna puts you into a suffering, he wants you to suffer? No, he wants you to respond in a conscious way. That's all. So that response to that suffering depends on how devotionally advanced we are. If we are more advanced, then we will be able to tolerate that suffering, and without wasting time in endeavoring to overcome that suffering, we can continue practicing our devotional service, direct devotional service, without any stoppage. But if we are not so devotionally advanced, then we will not have the capacity to tolerate that suffering. Then in that case, Krishna wants you to respond in a way, you may even try to reverse that suffering, but do it in a way that your devotional faith is not challenged. So no one said that Krishna does not want you to reverse the pain that Krishna has put you in. He just wants you to respond in a way that your devotional faith is not challenged. That's all. So is that relevant, Mati?
Yeah, so therefore, if a devotee goes to an astrologer because he wants to, he has that same intention to lessen the obstacles to his devotional service, is that not bona fide?
Okay, I will respond, but first I'll mute you.
Yeah.
So if he goes to an astrologer, he is telling Krishna that Krishna, not put me in the situation. It is karma which is still controlling my life. You are not controlling my life. So if rather than offering a prayer to you, I will go to an astrologer and try to fix it. So the dependence on Krishna will be compromised to the extent you are convinced that your suffering is due to karma only. So which means by making karmic adjustments, I can overcome. So then where is the scope of seeing Krishna's hands? Where is the scope of seeing? How will it lead to gratitude? Hridvag vapurbir vidadan namaste. How will that person actually see that my suffering, Krishna has given me suffering to pull me closer to his lotus feet? Rather than seeing that, he will see that, oh, my suffering is because of Rahu, Ketu, and Surya. So I will try to pacify them. I will try to adjust this. And in doing that, we will never be able to see Krishna's hands. What will Krishna do? Krishna will say, well, if you so much want only karma to control your life, if you don't want me to hands-on control your life, I would rather allow karma only to control your life. So that's what happens, because Krishna says that if I see a trace of attachment, a practitioner to worship some other demigod or something, Krishna says, I make that person's faith very strong. So the person instead is firmly refusing to see Krishna's hands. If the devotee is firmly hands in his life situations, but if he wants to see only karma in action, then Krishna will take his hands off actually and allow only karma to act in that person. That's what happens. That is Krishna's psychology. Is that relevant, Mati?
Very clear now, Prabhu. Thank you so much for persevering with me. Thank you.
That's actually my conditioning. What can I do? Okay, Tiffany Mataji.
Hi Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. Thank you for your explanations for Gail's questions, because they actually answered a couple of questions that I have. So I just have one more left. Obviously we are talking about Nishchaya after we completed the stage of Nishta. And my question is, do we develop Nishchaya only after we reach the stage of steadiness?
No. I mean,
Okay.
no. Nishchaya is, like one of the things was to the extent. So Nishchaya is to the extent we keep killing doubts.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a day-to-day practice. That is a day-to-day practice. So we keep killing the doubts, we gain confidence. So, and that confidence reaches a particular level of solid maturity when we reach the stage of Nishta. But it crosses a particular threshold, 70%, 80%, 90%, like that.
Right.
But we have to have some level of Nishchaya. We have to constantly endeavor to kill the demons of doubts so that we can endeavor with confidence, like that.
Okay. Because the way that I was looking at it is, it's obviously a higher level than Shraddha, and also like you just said, there's degrees of it. So Nisha. Okay. All right. I got it. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
So even at the stage of Shraddha, there is some level of Nishchaya. There is some level of confidence. That is the nature of faith. Faith means some level of confidence. Weak faith means weak confidence. But when that faith becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, the confidence becomes stronger and stronger. Like that. That's all. Anyways, so now, okay, there is one more question. Vani Shri Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. In continuation of the response and the answer you gave to Tiffany Mataji's query, I just had a short clarity required. You spoke about as and when the sadhaka's nishchaya gets increased, right, to whatever the percentage you said, then the nishta becomes, or nishta is manifested. He gets into the steadiness stage.
Yeah.
What about the anartha nivritti? No way connected to anartha nivritti and then nishta? I mean, am I missing something?
Yeah. I mean, even at the stage of anartha nivritti, there is some level of steadiness. So nishta is not like till yesterday I was in anartha nivritti, from tomorrow I will be in nishta. It is not like that. It's a very gradual. So and even no anarthas. There are anarthas, but then those anarthas are so less that it not affect the steady practice of devotional service. So these are all very gradual overlapping stages. So therefore, there is some level of steadiness even at the stage of anartha nivritti, and there are some anarthas even at the nishta. To the extent the doubts and the anarthas are gone, to that extent there is steadiness, and to that extent there is confidence also, like that.
So do I need to understand that sadhaka reaches the nishta stage only after the complete anartha nivritti and completely attains to the 100% nishchaya stage, both hand in hand, is that?
No, I mean, I didn't say that. I did say that
No,
at the
I'm
stage of
asking, I'm
Nishta
just
also.
asking.
No, I did say that at the stage of Nishta also there are anarthas. I never said that complete destruction of anarthas happens at the stage of Nishta. So Nishta means prayiki anartha nivritti. There is almost complete destruction. Maybe about 80%, 85% destruction of anarthas happens. at the stage of Nishta. But 100% happens only at the stage of Prem.
Okay. But Nishchaya will be 100% when he reaches the Nishta
More or less,
stage.
yeah. He will not
More
have any doubts. At the stage of Nishta, he will not have any doubts.
Okay. And when you say doubts, that is in the, what do you call the path? That one is following A, B is that in the supremacy of the Lord. I mean, that's what it means,
All these
right?
things, the Dashamola Tattva. So you will not have doubts in any of these principles.
I'm sorry, Prabhuji, I lost your voice. What did you say in all?
I said the 10 principles, the Dashamola Tattva that we have discussed.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You will
Okay.
have full confidence in all those points.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay. If there are no further discussion points or since, we will now move on to the 9th essay. 8 essays out of 12 we have completed, which means about 67% of the book we have completed. No, actually not, because the 12th essay is almost as long as the first 11 essays put together. The 12th essay is almost half the book actually. So in one sense, we are probably in the 26th week. We make another, let's say, maybe 10 weeks to complete 9, 10, 11. So maybe 36. It may take another 35 weeks. No, I don't think it will take that long. Maybe at least another 20, maybe 15 to 20 weeks at least after that to complete the last essay. Actually, it's a very long essay. It may take long time to discuss that essay also. Anyways, I hope that you are not in a hurry for the book to get completed. I have to confess that, I generally, when they ask me, when the course organizer asks me how long will it take, even though I know that it may take about 40, 50 sessions, I generally tell about 20 sessions. If I say 50 sessions, then the audience will all drop out because no one wants to keep attending for more than a year to complete a small book like Bhakti Aloka. So I tell them 20 weeks generally, so that the organizer also feels comfortable and the audience also feel comfortable. But internally, I know that it will take much longer than that. But by then, I get some time and opportunity to sort of gain confidence over my audience. That by the time about 20 weeks pass, then more or less people who are still sticking to the sessions, they know they lose that expectation of the course getting over. They become little more interested in trying to understand what exactly Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is trying to say. So at least that much confidence I have. I don't think most are really in a hurry that the book get over. So that's just my sort of trick. So I hope you will forgive me for tricking you and cheating you that way. Okay. So next we will move on to this principle of dhairya or patience. So dhairya has multiple meanings. The very first meaning is to resist the 6 urges. If you see in the very first verse of Upadeshamrita or Nectar of Instruction, Krishna says, Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jihva vegam, udaro veganyo vishaheta dhira, sarvan apimam prithvim sa sishyat. So he talks about dhira. He talks about dhira there. So dhira is connected to dhairya. So one who possesses dhairya is called dhira. So who is dhira? One who can resist the 6 urges are dhira. So therefore dhairya means the ability to resist the 6 urges. Okay. So, like that. So he says, so therefore here, this is one meaning of dhairya, means to resist the six urges. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, for the practitioner of divine service, dhairya or patience is extremely necessary. Those who possess the quality of dhairya are called dhira or sober. Due to lack of this quality, men become restless. Those who are impatient cannot do any work. So when one lacks dhairya, it means they cannot do any work. By the quality of dhairya, a practitioner controls first himself and then the whole world. Okay. So dhairya essentially means self-control. And self-control has these six aspects. One is controlling speech. Then control of one's own mind. Control of anger. Control of one's tongue in wanting to taste palatable foodstuffs. Then control of one's belly and control of one's genitals. So that is self. These six aspects. Only one who can control himself can control others. Okay, he can become a guru. Sarvan apimam prativimsta sishyat. He can become a guru. He says in the first verse of Shivapadeshamrit, the symptoms of dhairya are explained. Vacho vegam, manasah krodha vegam, jihva vegam, udaropastha vegam. Etan veganyo vishaheta dhiraha. Sarva apimam prativimsta sishyat. A sober person can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. This is about dhairya. So now we will start discussing about each of these six urges. How do we control? So how do we become a sober person? How do we develop this patience? So patience means what? This is one aspect of patience. Patience means the ability to tolerate the urge. You are able to wait. Patience means ability to wait. Ability to wait means ability to tolerate the urge. Okay. So this is a very broader understanding of patience, Arabia, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving here. So now we are going to discuss about each individual six urges. But before we do that, if there are any quick discussion points, comments, questions anyone would like to share as add, please go ahead. Okay, if there is none, we will continue our discussion. First, we will discuss about vachikam, the urge to speak. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there are six types of urges, namely the urges of speech, mind, anger, belly, tongue, and genitals. With a desire to speak more, a person becomes talkative. So we become impatient to present our ideas. That is lack of patience. So patience also manifests in the form of our ability to hold back our urge to present our ideas immediately. Okay. So if speech is not regulated, then enmity arises from talking to others. This is a very important point. If you cannot regulate, so that is why if you see Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this is a very important point. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there are four types of anarthas. First, he says, is Tattva Vibhrama. Then there is Asat Trishna. Then there is Aparada. there is Asat Trishna, Tattva Vibrama, uh, is the what is the fourth? Anyone remembers? Asat Trishna, Tattva Vibrama, Aparada, and or is it just? I'm not able to recollect. No. Okay, someone. Okay, someone else. Yeah, correct. Hridaya Daurbalyam. Thank you very much. Yeah, Hridaya Daurbalyam. Okay. So Tattva Vibrama. Anyway, I think I should add a slide here because this is a very important principle. Let me just add a slide here. Okay. So there are 4 types of anarthas. 4 anarthas. Okay, let's divide this into 4 quadrants. Okay, the first is Asat Trishna. Second is Tattva Vibrama. The third is Aparada. And the fourth is Hridaya Daurbalyam. Okay. So Asat Trishna means thirst for material enjoyment. Okay. So there are multiple subdivisions in this. I will not go into the details. So Asat Trishna means thirst for material enjoyment. Tattva Vibrama means you can say confusion or illusion about the conclusions of the Shastras. Okay. About the Dashamula Tattva. Aparad means offenses, Nam Aparad, Vaishnava Aparad, and all those kinds. And Hridaya Daurbalyam means weakness of heart. Okay. And the symptoms of a weak heart are envy, pride, pride, fault finding, deceit. These are symptoms of a weak heart, a malnourished heart. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives very beautiful solutions for all these things. How do you overcome Asat Trishna, thirst for material enjoyment? He says, follow verse 2. Okay, follow NOI verse 2. What is that? Atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha laulyamcha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. How does one's thirst for material enjoyment increase? The thirst increases for a devotee. The thirst for material enjoyment increases if he indulges in its activities. Overeating, over endeavoring for real success, prayasa, talking constantly to others about mundane subject matters of real enjoyment, and niyamagraha, for not following the rules of devotional service, and associating with non-Krishna conscious personalities, and greed. Okay, so if one tries to scrutinizingly avoid these 6 things, then one can to a significant degree stop the thirst for material enjoyment. Okay, so then he says, what about tattva vibrama? How one overcome tattva vibrama? By chastity to guru, sadhu, and shastra. By chastity to guru, sadhu, and shastra, we can overcome tattva vibrama. How one can overcome hridaya daurbalyam, a weak heart? So how one can overcome a weak heart? By nourishing, what nourishes the heart? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, follow my verse 4. What is verse 4? Dadati pratigrinnati guhyakyati pritchati bhungte bhojayate cheva shadvidam priti lakshanam. The 6 exchanges between the devotees. Giving gifts, receiving, accepting gifts in return, feeding that person, accepting prasadam in return, and sharing one's heart in confidence, and hearing from that person with empathy. Right? So these are the 6 exchanges. When these 6 exchanges manifest, when the heart becomes nourished with love, malnourishment, symptoms of malnourishment due to lack of love, which manifest in the form of envy, pride, fault finding, deceit, etc., they vanish. So therefore he says, if you follow NOI verse 4 very nicely, then one's heart will be overwhelmed with love, receiving and giving love, that there will be no space for envy, pride, fault finding, and other such symptoms of a weak heart. And finally, how one can overcome offense? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives a beautiful answer. He says, follow NOI verse 1. He says, if you can control your 6 urges, primarily the urge to speak, then you can avoid offenses. If you patiently to speak about others, there is no offense. But if one cannot tolerate it, it is a recipe for repeated offenses. If one cannot tolerate the urge to speak, then it is a disaster recipe. It will definitely lead to offenses. That's what here Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is also mentioning, that if speech is not regulated, then enmity is from talking about others. To speak uselessly is the business of a fool, but out of a desire to unnecessarily engage in speech, the material always wastes time and face so many distresses. So this is a problem with devotees, right? Pious people observe Maunavrata or silence in order to get up this disturbance. That is why the rishis have made provisions for observing various vows like Mauna, because if you needlessly keep speaking, then it leads to offenses. So therefore, to observe the vow of silence is prescribed, especially for those kind of practitioners, spiritual practitioners, who do not have pure devotional faith. So But Srimad Bhagavatam says that Vivikta Rucha Paritosha Atmani Vina Harer Guna Piyusha Panat. So the four Kumaras in their teachings to Prithu Maharaj, they say that one should develop a taste for solitude as long as one has not developed a taste for sharing Krishna Katha. Okay. Here also we are talking. Most of the times I am talking, unfortunately, and sometimes I also let you talk. Right. So there is talk, or I mean, I can't call this conversation, even though I would honestly prefer it to be in the form of conversation. But mm, anyways, but the principle is that silence is definitely better than nonsense talk, but discussing Krishna Katha is definitely better than silence. If one has not developed a taste for sharing Krishna Katha, then it is better to remain silent. So, like that. So the practitioners of devotional service should not speak unnecessarily. If you do have to speak unnecessarily, better keep quiet. Besides topics regarding Krishna, all other topics are unnecessary. Of course, topics about one's own struggles with a genuine desire to overcome that struggle, one seeks help from the other person. That is still topic connected to Krishna only, because we want to become steadily connected, steadily engaged in Krishna's service. For that purpose, we want to overcome that struggle. So that is not an unnecessary topic. But to speak about the subjects favorable devotional service is not unnecessary. Therefore, devotees should speak only topics about Lord or those favorable to such topics. All other topics will be counted in the category of the urge to speak. One who is able to control the urge to speak is a sober person. Okay. That's about the urge to speak. Any quick discussion points, comments, questions? Okay. If there is none, we will continue. But one point I just wanted to make here. The point is that one may not have these qualities naturally. If one does not have these qualities naturally, then one has to practice them. One has to practice. So it is one thing to develop this quality as a virtue. Like, for example, tolerance, okay, or humility. Okay, there are two aspects to this. One is action, another is virtue. Okay, we developed tolerance or humility as a virtue when there is subduing of mode of passion and mode of ignorance, and this is a very gradual process. Okay, so to become a humble person or a tolerant person takes time. Humbly or act with tolerance needs appreciation of the goal of our life. We need to appreciate the goal of life. So when you understand that, I really value progressing on the path of devotional service. So if I act in an arrogant way, if I act in an intolerant way, it will cause offense and it will compromise my progress on the path of devotional service. So therefore, let me act with humility, act with tolerance. Even though I may not have essentially developed that the virtue of tolerance or humility. So here we may not, we may not be, we may be constantly tormented by the urge to speak. But we have to, by understanding that if I don't tolerate this urge to speak, I will end up speaking something, I will end up offending devotees, and I will end up compromising my progress towards the lotus feet of Krishna. By understanding this, I try to act in a way that I control the urge to speak. But gradually, when I progress on the path of devotional service, when the mode of passion and mode of ignorance starts going down more and more and more and more, I will stop getting the urge to speak only. Therefore, to develop that virtue of tolerance and humility is a very gradual process, but one need not wait till one develops that virtue. One need develop the virtue of humility to act humbly. One need not develop the virtue of tolerance to act tolerantly. One need not develop the virtue of um, um, of not speaking unnecessarily to actually stop speaking unnecessarily. One can understand that, oh, I value my spiritual progress, so I will tolerate the urge. So that is the point. So when there is a strong attachment to purpose, then one develops the ability to put certain actions, certain behavior to action, right? Even though we may not possess that virtue, even though we may not possess the virtue of tolerance or humility, we may still act tolerantly or humbly if we have a strong attachment to the purpose of our life. Like that. Any comments on this point before we move ahead? Yes, Mother Gail.
So we may not have the virtue, we may not be possessing it, but we can still act that way. So the fact that we are able to act that way, why does that not mean that we have that virtue?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because I will give an example. But first I will tell you. So, like if you have traveled, I'm sure you all must have traveled in a flight, and you have the stewards or the air hostesses, who, I mean, there might be exceptions, but in most cases, they always smile at you. They are very polite. They are very gentle. They are very helpful. Even though internally that may not be their nature. Okay, to constantly do it throughout the day, to possess that kind of tolerance and gentle character, one needs a lot of mode of goodness, actually, sattva guna. And it's not that the only people, they have a means of testing the gunas, and they recruit only those people who have very strong sattva guna. No. So those people may not have the virtue of gentleness, but day in and day out, they are able to act gently, How? Because they value their job. They value their salary, which is their means of livelihood. So it is not necessary that it's not very that one can act in a particular way virtue. No, that is not necessary. Even without virtue, one can act. If only one is able to see the connection between acting with tolerance, acting with humility, and pleasing Krishna and pleasing. If one is able to make that connection, even though internally one may feel very angry, one may want to shout at that person, but he may externally behave very gently. Is that relevant, Mataji?
Okay, so therefore, a person who possesses the virtue,
Mhm.
to express that virtue, how should I say? He doesn't require to make. It's not required for him to make any particular special endeavor. You know,
Yeah.
whereas a person who doesn't have that virtue, it's like he has to suppress his natural urges.
Correct.
Yeah. So the person who possesses the virtue, he doesn't need to suppress anything. Actually, isn't it?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now, here, one thing I wanted to mention, because people often ask this question, Prabhu, if internally I want to bash this person, internally I don't feel good about this person, but externally, if I act in a very gentle way, isn't that duplicity? People ask this question. Isn't that duplicity? Isn't that mm, cheating? Now, no, this is certainly not duplicity, because a sadhaka, what exactly is a sadhaka doing when, even though according to his nature he wants to just bash this person, he's feeling angry and irritated by that person, he wants to criticize that person, beat up that person, but he ends up acting very gently. Is that duplicity? This question arises. So is that dishonesty? Now we have to understand, a sadhaka always has these two types of stimulus. One stimulus comes from his conditioning, the conditioning of anger, the conditioning of intolerance, and the other it is coming from his pure devotional faith. So if the sadhaka chooses to respond to his pure devotional faith and chooses not to respond to his conditioning, is that duplicity? No, that is responsible behavior. That is not duplicity, that is responsible behavior. Or on the other hand, if sadhaka chooses to respond to his conditioning of anger and beats up the, not to respond to his pure devotional faith of acting for the pleasure of Krishna and Guru, is that honesty? So many times we think honesty means to do what your heart says. That is not honesty actually. For a sadhaka, honesty means that honesty does not mean just do what your heart says. Just do what your conditioning says. That is not honesty. That is irresponsible behavior. Responsible behavior means even though one may be pushed by the urge of our anarthas or conditionings of pride, arrogance, anger, even though we may be pushed by these kind of conditionings, if one chooses to act according to the injunctions of the scriptures, if one chooses to act according to for the pleasure of Krishna and Guru, that is not duty. That is actually responsible behavior. And maybe if one person chooses to act according to one's conditioning, that is not honest, that is irresponsible behavior. This is one point I wanted to touch upon, because many times this question comes, gee, if internally I feel bad about that person, externally I'm speaking goody with that person, isn't that dishonesty? Well, if one does that with some ulterior motive, that we want to get something done from that person, because of which we are acting in that way, that is duplicity. But if for the purpose of pleasing Guru and Krishna, I suppress my conditioning and act according to my faith, that is not duplicity, that is responsible behavior. Any quick comments, discussion points, questions on this point before we move ahead to the topic of Manasa Vegam, the controlling the urge of the mind? Anything anyone would like to share as before we move ahead? Okay, if there is none, we will continue our discussion. Controlling the urge of the mind. So here Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, it is the duty of a sober person to tolerate the urge of the mind. So he's talking about duty. Duty means it is not a virtue. We have not developed it as a virtue. So therefore there has to be an endeavor. Okay. There it is mentioned, therefore it is the duty of a sober person to tolerate the urge of the mind. Until one is habituated to control the urge of the mind, how can one perform devotional service with attention? A materialist sits in the chariot of the mind and never gets relief from its various urges except during sleep. Okay, a materialist. Why? Because a materialist is not bound by a value system. A materialist is not bound by a value system which, on the strength of which he can resist his urges. There is no incentive for a materialist to resist his urges, actually. There is a question in the chat box. It becomes duplicity or hypocrisy if the person backbites. Yeah, backbiting is wrong. That is true. That is true. Yes, I agree with that point. Okay. So for a materialist, there is no incentive to resist the urge. Whereas for a devotee, there is an incentive. Okay. Because we want to progress in the path of devotional service, we want to please Krishna and Guru. So there is an incentive to resist that urge. Even during sleep, many thoughts such as good and bad used to come. In order to regulate the urges of the mind, rishis have propounded Ashtanga Yoga or Raja Yoga. Krishna says, Arjuna says, Chanchalam himana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham vayodi vasudushkaram. My dear Krishna, you have asked to control the mind by the practice of this yoga, but I think it is very, very difficult because the mind is very stubborn and very difficult to control. So Krishna says, Asamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyasi Kaunteya Vairagya out. Oh, what you say is right. The mind is very difficult to control. But by proper practice of Ashtanga Yoga and by properly refraining from the unfavorable things, it is possible to control the urges of the mind, he says. But the Lord's prescription is that one should regulate the mind from the inferior taste by giving it a higher taste. This is Bhakti. Okay. Those who are on the path of devotional service can easily regulate the mind. The mind cannot remain without urges. So the point is, I think we did discuss this last time also. Let's see, there is three more slides. Okay. I just wanted to touch this point, but if I touch that point, I will not be able to cover this section. Anyways, I will touch the point next week, but let us just cover this section at least. If urged towards spiritual subjects, the mind is properly engaged and it will not hanker for insignificant subjects. No, I cannot go ahead. I have to discuss on this point. Okay. It may take a few extra minutes. We have 5 minutes. I may go a few minutes more longer. So I apologize beforehand. So I did discuss this before, but I really want to emphasize on this point that we do practice devotional service at various levels. Okay, that is devotional service at the level of succumbing stage. Okay, where we have many desires which are unfavorable for Krishna consciousness, and we succumb to those desires. Then there is the stage of dovetailing, where we engage in likable devotional activities. Okay. Then there is the higher stage of Yukta Vairagya. Okay, where one is able to engage in devotional service detachment. And then there is spontaneous devotional service, where one is able to engage in devotional service out of pure love for pleasing Krishna. So in the beginning stage of devotional service, we all, or many of us, may be very vulnerable to our conditionings. So we succumb to many devotionally unfavorable habits. We may succumb to it. So therefore, in the early stages of devotional service, it is very, very critical that one chooses to engage in likable devotional activities, which is the stage of dovetailing. Okay, but many times devotees are discouraged from engaging in likable devotionals. They are told that devotional service is for the pleasure of Krishna. Devotional service is not for your own pleasure. If you are attached to the activities which you are doing, it is not bhakti, it is karma yoga. People are told this way. And in good spirits, they speak this way, but this is not correct actually. This kind of guidance can be a serious obstacle to the sadhaka. Okay, because what we don't realize is that this sadhaka is very much prone to succumbing to non-devotional ways of killing boredom. Okay, so when people become bored, they should have they want to engage in some things that they like to do. And many times people are told, if you like to do Krishna, if you do Krishna consciousness because you like to do, that is karma yoga. So then naturally what they do, when they want to do something which they like, they will not do Krishna consciousness. They will engage in non-Krishna conscious activities. They will end up watching TV. They will end up doing all kinds of unfavorable things, right? So rather, one, in the early stages, understanding that this person is very much prone to succumbing, uh, 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 you know, mature leaders should ensure that they are very carefully engaged in devotional activities which they like. There must be an endeavor to engage them in likable devotionals, because otherwise they cannot come to the stage of Yukta Vairagya. Many times, for various reasons, either very innocently or because there is a need for the institution, there are institutional needs. Therefore, many times, very beginner level sadhakas are forced engaging in likable devotional service and are expected to come immediately, almost immediately, to the level of Yukta Vairagya, which is impossible actually. What happens is they will end up engaging in some activities for the institutional needs, but other times, to kill boredom, they will engage in non-devotional activities, which means they will not rise up above the level of succumbing. So therefore, you cannot skip the stage of dovetailing and take a person directly to the level of Yukta Vairagya. So therefore, it is important. So in order to regulate the mind by giving it higher taste, first, initially we have to start giving it some likable engagements. So the fact that one is choosing to engage in Krishna's service in itself means that he wants to eventually act for the pleasure of Krishna. But within that, because the urge of the conditioning can be very strong, therefore, one should be assisted. The beginner level should be strongly assisted by the leaders by trying to identify what they like within the devotional realm and engaging them in that, so that their mind remains very peaceful and it is not troubled by urges. So there must be solid likable devotional means to boredom, and devotees should be encouraged to engage in that, at least in the beginning stages. So that way, slowly they can come to the stage of dovetailing, and from dovetailing acts as a very favorable platform to come to the stage of Yukta Vairagya. We did this last week or the week before that, I don't remember, or maybe it was in this forum or some other forum, I don't recollect. But this is something which I wanted to emphasize. But before we wind up for the day, if there are any last final questions, comments, if anyone would like to share before we wind up, anything? Okay, if there is none, okay, there is one hand up. Yes, Mother Gail.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. You made this statement, I believe, that the mind does not exist without urges, correct?
Did I say that? I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious about that because, you know, as we advance, you know, aren't those urges supposed to go away, or is it that is, the nature
it's
of
there in the slide. Someone says it's there in the last. The mind cannot remain without urges. It says the last statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, that statement reminds me of the fact that as a soul, right, there's no such thing as having of being without desires. You know, the soul has to have desires. It's the nature of the soul. So,
Yeah.
how do I reconcile this then?
Yeah. Or you hear the or is it the mind which cannot remain without urges, or is it the soul which cannot remain without the urges? Your question?
Well, I don't know. I'm just surprised by this statement that the mind cannot remain without urges. How is that so? You know, is it that the mind, we're supposed to come to the point where we don't have any urges in the mind at all? No, wait. I'm confused here. The mind cannot remain. So this statement is saying that the mind has to have urges. It has to have.
Either material or spiritual.
Okay. So then that's the answer that I was looking for, because we do hear that the nature of the soul is to have desires, which I think is maybe a little synonymous with urges, right?
I just want you to remember this question because it will take some time to address, but I do want to address this point. So if you can just remind in our next session.
Yes,
I just
will.
want to take this question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much. So I think we will pause here. So thank you all very much for your patient listening and your enthusiastic participation. We will continue this discussion next week. So Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Shri Bhakti Aloka ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.